The taste of silver never leaves your mouth down here. It coats your tongue like a film of metal and despair, seeping into every breath until you cannot remember what clean air felt like. My hands have not stopped bleeding in 8 months. The skin splits and heals and splits again, cracking along the same fault lines where the pickaxe handle has worn grooves into my palms. I swing again. I will swing until I die, and then they will drag my body to the corner where the rats wait, and someone else will take my place at this vein of ore. Welcome to Cidhna Mine, the most secure prison in all of Skyrim. They say no one escapes. They say it like a warning, but after you have been here long enough, you understand it differently. It is not a threat. It is a mercy. Because escaping would mean you still believed there was something worth escaping to. I was not always this thing that swings a pickaxe in the dark. I had a name that meant something once. I had a life in Markarth, ordinary in all the ways that matter, remarkable only in how completely it has been erased. I was a silversmith, if you can believe the irony. I shaped the ore that other men pulled from the earth, crafting it into rings and goblets and fine cutlery for the noble families of the Reach. My shop sat in the lower warrens of the city, carved into the same Dwemer stone that surrounds me now, though it felt different then. The stone of my shop was home. The stone of this mine is a tomb. I had a wife named Cidhna. I had 2 children, a boy of 7 winters and a girl of 4. I had debts, the kind that every working man carries, owed to the Silverblood family for the lease on my shop and the materials I needed to practice my trade. I thought these debts made me beholden. I did not understand that in Markarth, everyone owes the Silverbloods something, and they collect when it suits them, in whatever currency they prefer. My crime was nothing. My crime was everything. A shipment of silver went missing from the smelter, and someone had to answer for it. The guards came to my shop with their stone-faced certainty and their accusations that I could not disprove. How does a man prove he did not do something? How does he account for every moment of every day when powerful men have already decided his guilt? Thonar Silverblood needed a body to fill a quota, a worker to replace one who had died in the mine the week before. My body was convenient. My guilt was irrelevant. The trial lasted less than an hour. I stood in the Jarl's Great Hall, that towering chamber built on Dwemer bones, and I watched the guards present evidence I had never seen, testimony from witnesses I had never met. My wife wept in the gallery. My children did not understand why their father was being taken away. The Jarl pronounced sentence with the weariness of a man who had spoken these words 1,000 times before and would speak them 1,000 times again. Cidhna Mine. Life sentence. No possibility of release. They did not let me say goodbye. They dragged me through the streets of Markarth, while citizens watched with the careful blankness of people who know that looking too sympathetic might make them next. I saw my son trying to push through the crowd, his small fists beating against the legs of adults who would not let him pass. That is my last memory of the surface world. My boy's face, twisted with confusion and grief, growing smaller as they pulled me toward the gates. The descent into Cidhna Mine takes you through passages that grow narrower and darker with every step. The guards escort you past the first checkpoint, where they take your clothes and give you rags that smell of 100 previous owners. Past the second checkpoint, where they take your name and give you a number. I am 473 now. That is all I am. Past the third checkpoint, where they take your hope, though you do not realize it until later. Then they push you through the final gate, and you are alone with the others. The first thing you learn about Cidhna Mine is that it has its own society, its own rules, its own kings and peasants. The guards rarely venture past the first chambers. They watch the gates, they count the ore, they let prisoners police prisoners. So long as the quotas are met, the Silverbloods own the gates. Madanach owns what lies behind them. The mine regulates itself through a brutal economy of violence and silver. You dig ore. You turn the ore in to the foreman at the gate. The foreman gives you scraps of food, sips of water, a space to sleep. If you do not dig enough ore, you do not eat. If you cannot dig at all, you die. The system is elegant in its cruelty. The second thing you learn is that the Forsworn control everything past the gate. I had heard of the Forsworn before I came here, the way everyone in the Reach has heard of them. Native Reachmen who rejected Nord rule, who worshipped the old gods, who killed settlers and burned farms in their war to reclaim the land. I thought they were savages. I thought they were monsters. I did not understand that they were simply people who had lost everything and decided that loss gave them permission to take everything in return. Their leader is a man named Madanach. The king in rags, they call him, though he wears his rags like royal robes. He has been in Cidhna Mine for 20 years, ever since the Nords crushed the forsworn uprising and reclaimed Markarth in blood. 20 years in this darkness, and yet he rules here more absolutely than any Jarl rules on the surface. Some whisper that Thonar silver blood keeps him alive deliberately, using him to control the forsworn outside these walls through threats and leverage. If true, it means even the king in rags is someone's pawn. But down here, in the tunnels beyond the guard's sight, his word is law. His judgment is final. Cross him, and you disappear into one of the deeper passages where even the torchlight does not reach. I learned to fear Madanach before I ever saw his face. In those first weeks, I dug my oar in silence and kept my eyes down and tried to make myself invisible. It did not work. Nothing works down here except submission or death. They came for me after my 6th week. 3 forsworn with filed teeth and prison tattoos covering their arms, their eyes holding that particular emptiness of men who have killed so many times that killing has become as natural as breathing. They took me to a chamber deep in the mine, a natural cavern that the forsworn had claimed as their territory. Madanach sat on a throne of stacked ore crates, an old man with white hair and a scholar's face, looking nothing like the monster I had imagined. He asked me questions. My name, my crime, my family. He asked about my shop, about the silver I had worked with, about the silver bloods who had put me here. I answered honestly because lies would have gotten me killed and truth could not make my situation any worse. When I finished, he smiled, and that smile contained more knowledge of human suffering than I had accumulated in my entire life. He told me I would dig for him now. Not for the guards, not for the silver bloods, but for him and his cause. The ore I extracted would fill the quotas that kept the forsworn fed while they planned whatever they were planning in the depths of this mountain. I would be useful. And useful men lived longer than useless ones. I did not have a choice. I said yes. The days in Cidhna Mine have no beginning and no end. There is no sunrise to mark the morning, no sunset to signal rest. There is only the eternal blue glow of the ore veins and the distant orange flicker of torches and the endless sound of picks striking stone. You work until your body fails, then you sleep wherever you fall, then you wake to the sound of others working, and you join them again. Time becomes meaningless. Weeks blur into months. Months might blur into years if you survive long enough. I learned the rhythms of the mine the way a man learns the rhythms of his own heartbeat. The scrape of picks against silver ore, a sound so constant it becomes silence. The drip of water from cracks in the ceiling, counting seconds that no longer matter. The screams that come from the deeper tunnels, sometimes human, sometimes not, always ending in the same abrupt silence. The shuffle of feet as prisoners move between work sites, too exhausted for conversation, too broken for rebellion. The smell is something visitors to the surface would never understand. It is not simply the stench of unwashed bodies, though that is part of it. It is the mineral tang of exposed ore, the sulphurous whisper of gases that seep from deeper fissures, the sweet rotting odor of wounds that never heal properly in this damp darkness. Some prisoners develop a cough in their first week that never leaves them, a wet rattling sound that accompanies their every breath until the day they stop breathing entirely. The healers call it silver lung, though there are no real healers down here, only men who remember fragments of alchemy from their former lives. Your skin changes in Cidhna Mine. Without sunlight, it grows pale as cave mushrooms, thin and translucent in places, easy to tear and slow to mend. My forearms are covered in scars now, layered over each other like the rings of a tree, documenting every collision with jagged rock, every accident with a pick gone astray, every punishment carved into flesh by men with sharp things. The older prisoners bear their scars proudly. They are proof of survival, evidence that the mine has tried to kill them and failed. My fingernails have become something unrecognizable, cracked and blackened by the ore dust that works its way into every crevice, thickened and yellowed by the damp, shaped by constant contact with stone until they curve like claws. I caught my reflection in a pool of still water once, just briefly, and I did not recognize the face looking back. Hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, lips cracked and bleeding. The face of a Draga, one of those walking corpses that haunt the Nordic tombs, except this corpse still draws breath and swings a pick and pretends to be alive. The temperature down here never changes. It hovers at a constant chill, not cold enough to freeze but never warm enough for comfort. Your bones ache with it, a deep, persistent cold that no amount of movement can shake. Some prisoners huddle together for warmth when they sleep, sharing body heat like animals in a burrow. Others refuse this contact, preferring the cold to the vulnerability of closeness. I sleep alone now. I have learned that closeness is dangerous, that anyone who gets too near to you will eventually be taken away or will betray you or will die, and each loss carves another piece from whatever remains of your heart. I learned which tunnels to avoid. The eastern passages belong to a gang of reachmen who kill outsiders on sight. The northern depths flood during spring thaw, drowning anyone unlucky enough to be working the lower veins. The western chambers hold something worse than either, something the older prisoners speak of only in whispers. They call it the warden. Might be a man gone feral after too many years in the dark. Might be something that crawled up from even deeper places. Might be nothing but a story prisoners tell to keep newcomers away from claimed territory. But they say it takes those who wander too far from the light, and does things to them that make death seem kind. I have never seen the warden. I do not intend to find out if the stories are true. I stay close to the central shafts where Madanakh's authority holds, and the torches burn bright, and the horrors are only human. The social hierarchy of Cidhna Mine is as rigid as any noble court, though its rules are written in blood rather than etiquette. At the bottom are the fresh arrivals, the ones still soft from surface living, still believing that their innocence matters, still hoping that someone will listen to their pleas. They last a few weeks at most. Either they toughen or they break, and the broken ones do not survive long in a place where weakness invites predation. Above them are the workers, the men who have accepted their fate and found a rhythm of survival. They dig their ore, pay their tributes, keep their heads down, and measure their lives in the small victories of another day breathing. I am among them now, though it took months to earn even this meager status. We are the livestock of this place, valuable only for our labor, protected only so long as we remain productive. Above the workers are the gangs, the territorial groups that control different sections of the mine. They take tribute from those who work their tunnels, offer protection from other gangs, enforce their own brutal justice. Most are forsworn aligned with Madanach, but some are simply collections of desperate men who banded together because numbers mean survival. The gangs war with each other constantly, brief savage conflicts over ore veins and sleeping chambers, and perceived insults that leave bodies in the darker passages. At the top sits Madanach and his inner circle, the king in rags, ruling from his throne of crates, dispensing justice and death with equal indifference. His lieutenants are the most dangerous men in the mine, survivors of 20 years of this darkness, hardened beyond anything the surface world could imagine. They move through the tunnels like wolves through a forest, and everyone steps aside when they pass. The food is gruel, the same grey slop every day, flavoured with whatever insects fall into the pot during cooking. The water comes from an underground stream that tastes of minerals and rust, and something else I have learned not to think about. The sleeping quarters are carved niches in the rock, barely large enough for a man to lie flat, stacked 3 high like bunks on a ship sailing nowhere. You sleep with one eye open because possession in this mine is determined by strength, and everything you have can be taken while you rest. I have been beaten 4 times. Once for looking at a forsworn lieutenant too long, once for failing to meet my ore quota during a week when sickness made my arms too weak to swing, once for defending another prisoner, a young Breton boy who reminded me of my son, from men who wanted to use him for purposes I cannot speak of, once for no reason at all that I could determine, simply because violence is the currency of this place, and some men need to spend it regularly to feel alive. The worst beating was the 3rd one. I knew what would happen when I stepped between the boy and his attackers. I knew I would suffer for it, but I remembered my own son's face, that last glimpse of him in the crowd as they dragged me away, and I could not stand by while another father's child was destroyed. They broke 3 of my ribs. They took my sleeping niche and my food tokens for a week. The boy disappeared anyway, taken by different men to a different fate while I lay bleeding in a corner. That was when I understood that heroism does not exist in Cidhna Mine. There are no rescues. There are no happy endings. There is only suffering, sometimes your own and sometimes witnessed, and the small mercy of not being the one who is suffering today. The ribs healed wrong. I can feel them still, a wrongness in my chest when I breathe deeply, a reminder of that moment when I tried to be the man I used to be and learned that man was already dead. The mind does not permit goodness. Every act of mercy is punished, every attempt at kindness exploited. The only morality that survives down here is the morality of the predator, taking what you need, protecting what you have, showing no weakness that others might exploit. I have stopped trying to be good. I have stopped trying to be anything except alive. When I see suffering now, I look away. When I hear screaming, I continue working. When bodies are dragged past my station toward the deeper tunnels, I do not ask who they were or what they did. Every question is a risk. Every moment of attention is energy that could be spent surviving. Some prisoners maintain rituals from their former lives. A Nord in my section still whispers prayers to Talos each morning, though the Thalmor would execute him for it on the surface. An elderly Breton marks the passage of days by scratching lines into his sleeping niche, though the days down here are meaningless. A young Reachman still braids his hair in the old style, though no one remains to see it except other prisoners who no longer care about such things. These rituals are not religion or culture. They are anchors, desperate attempts to hold on to something that proves you were once something else. I had rituals too, in the beginning. I would whisper my children's names before sleeping. I would trace the shape of my wife's face in the air with my finger. I would recite the steps of silverworking, the techniques I had mastered over years of practice, keeping the knowledge alive in my mind even as my hands forgot their precision. But the rituals faded, one by one, as the months accumulated. Now I sleep without speaking. Now my hands remember only the weight of a pickaxe. Now my family exists only as ghosts, growing fainter with each passing day until I can barely recall their voices. I met a man named Grisvar in my 6th month. He had been in the mine for 6 years, which made him one of the oldest surviving prisoners. He showed me where to find the safest ore veins, the ones far enough from territorial disputes that you could work in relative peace. He taught me how to swing a pickaxe efficiently, saving strength for the long hours ahead. He explained which guards could be bribed during the rare supply deliveries and what kind of contraband they might bring down for the right price. Grisvar had been a thief on the surface, a professional who worked the wealthy districts of Markarth until he got caught lifting a necklace from the Jarl's own wife. His hands still had the delicate precision of his former trade, though now they wrapped around a pickaxe handle instead of lockpicks. He told me stories of the city above, of sunlight on stone and the smell of juniper and the taste of mead in a warm tavern. He told me these stories not because they brought comfort, but because forgetting them would mean losing the last proof that another world existed. Grisvar also told me about the ones who broke completely. Not the ones who died, that was simple enough, but the ones who lost their minds while their bodies continued functioning. He pointed them out to me in the tunnels, men who stared at nothing and spoke to people who were not there, who had retreated so far inside themselves that the mine could no longer touch them. They wandered like ghosts, ignored by the gangs because there was nothing left to take, fed scraps by other prisoners out of some residual sense of mercy. The mine had consumed their sanity and left only the shells. Some of them had been down here for decades. Some had been nobles or scholars or warriors on the surface. One, Grisvar claimed, had been a court wizard, a master of destruction magic who could have burned his way out of any normal prison. But something about Cidhna Mine made magic unreliable. Some prisoners swore the ancient stone drank magicka, that Dwemer enchantments still lingered in the walls. Others said it was simply the exhaustion, the starvation, the despair that made spellcasting impossible. Whatever the truth, the wizard had tried to burn his captors and found only sputtering sparks where infernos should have blazed. That failure had driven him mad. I told him about my family. My wife, my children, my shop full of silver. I described them in detail, every feature of their faces, every habit and preference, building them in words because I could not hold them in my arms. Grisvar listened without judgment. He had lost people too. Everyone down here has lost people, but he warned me not to hold too tightly to memories. The ones who clung to their former lives were the ones who suffered most. The mine demanded that you let go, that you become nothing except a creature of the present moment. Those who refused that demand eventually joined the wandering mad. One night, if you can call it night when darkness is perpetual, Grisvar told me about the Forsworn's plan. Madanach was not simply waiting in this prison. He was organizing, recruiting, building an army in the depths of the mountain while the Silverbloods believed he was neutralized. The ore quotas that kept the guards satisfied were a cover for something larger, a network of communication with Forsworn cells throughout the Reach, a slow and patient preparation for the day when the king in rags would return to the surface and reclaim his kingdom in blood. He told me about the tunnels beyond the official boundaries of the mine, passages that Madanach's men had secretly expanded over 2 decades of patient work. There were chambers down there that no guard had ever seen, stockpiles of weapons fashioned from stolen ore and sharpened stone, meeting halls where the forsworn planned their uprising away from prying eyes. The mine that the Silverbloods thought they controlled was only the surface. Beneath it lay something far more dangerous. I asked Grisvar why he was telling me this. He smiled with teeth that had turned grey from the mineral water and said that everyone down here eventually had to choose. The Forsworn were building something, and you could be part of it or you could be in the way of it. There was no neutral ground. The mine was too small, and Madanach's eyes were too many. I thought about my family, about whether they still waited for me, whether they still hoped I might return, or whether they had accepted the truth that the guards told every prisoner's family. No one escapes Cidhna Mine. Your husband is dead, even if his body still moves. Your father is gone, even if he still draws breath. Move on. Forget. Build a new life on the grave of the old. I thought about the Silverbloods, who had put me here for no crime except being convenient, who owned the mine and the guards and the Jarl and everyone else in Markarth, buying and selling lives like the ore we extracted from these walls. I thought about Thonar's face, that smug certainty of a man who knew the system existed to serve him. I thought about Madanach, the king in rags, building his revolution in the dark. A murderer, certainly. A fanatic, probably. But also a man who had lost everything, the way I had lost everything, and refused to let that loss be the end of his story. Grisvar asked me what I would do when the time came, when the Forsworn made their move and the tunnels ran red and everyone had to pick a side. Would I fight for the men who stole my life, or would I fight against them? I did not answer. I could not answer. Because the truth was that I no longer knew who I was or what I believed or what kind of man I had become in these months of darkness and silver dust. The silversmith from Markarth was dead, the loving husband, the devoted father, the honest tradesman, all dead. What remained was something harder and emptier, a creature of survival instincts and suppressed rage, capable of violence I would never have imagined on the surface. Cidhna Mine does not simply imprison your body, it imprisons your soul. It takes everything you were and grinds it down, day by day, swing by swing, until nothing remains but the raw material of a man. Then it reshapes that material into something that can survive in the dark, something that can watch atrocities and feel nothing, something that can commit atrocities when necessary and sleep soundly afterward. I watched a man die yesterday, or what passes for yesterday down here. He had been working a vein near the flooded tunnels, trying to extract ore that others considered too dangerous to reach. A support beam gave way, and the ceiling came down, and he was buried under 1,000 pounds of stone before anyone could reach him. We heard him screaming for hours, his voice growing weaker, begging for help that no one could provide. The Forsworn forbade any rescue attempts. The tunnel was too unstable. One life was not worth risking more, so we listened to him die. We kept working our own veins while his screams became whimpers and his whimpers became silence. When the sound finally stopped, someone made a crude joke about him meeting the warden, and a few prisoners laughed, and then we all went back to swinging our picks as if nothing had happened. I laughed too. That is what terrifies me. I laughed because laughing is how you survive, how you distance yourself from the horror, how you convince yourself that you are still alive and the dead man is not you. I laughed, and I felt nothing except a vague relief that my own tunnel remained stable for another day. This is what the mine makes of men. This is the transformation that awaits everyone who passes through those gates. You enter as a person, with memories and hopes, and the capacity for empathy. You remain as something else, something hollowed out and refilled with darkness, something that resembles a person only in the shape of its body. I have seen the transformation in others. I have watched new prisoners arrive with fire in their eyes and defiance in their posture, swearing they would escape, swearing they would not break. I have watched that fire dim week by week, replaced first by resignation, then by emptiness, then by something harder and colder than the stone itself. The darkness here is relentless. It has broken stronger men than any of us. It takes its time because time is the one thing it possesses in infinite supply. The transformation happens in stages, though you do not notice it while it occurs. First, you stop dreaming of escape. Then you stop dreaming of the surface at all. Then you stop dreaming entirely. Your sleep becoming a blank void between shifts at the ore vein. Your memories of life before the mine grow dim, distant, belonging to someone else. The face of your wife becomes a blur. The sound of your children's laughter fades until you cannot be certain you ever heard it at all. Then the anger fades too. The rage at your unjust imprisonment, the hatred for the Silver Bloods, and the corrupt guards and the system that destroyed your life, it all drains away like water through sand. Anger requires energy. Anger requires hope that things could be different. In Cidhna Mine, there is no energy to spare and no hope to sustain. You become neutral, observant, accepting. You swing your pick because that is what you do. You eat your gruel because that is what you eat. You exist because you have not yet stopped existing. Some prisoners speak of reaching a state beyond suffering, a kind of peace found in total surrender. They say that once you accept, you will never leave. Once you release every attachment to the world above, the mine loses its power to hurt you. I do not know if this is wisdom or madness. Perhaps in a place like this, there is no difference. I still think about my family. I still picture their faces before I sleep, still whisper their names like prayers to gods who cannot hear me through all this stone. But the connection is fading. They are becoming characters in a story I once heard rather than people I once loved. The silversmith who kissed his wife goodbye each morning feels like someone else entirely, a stranger whose life I happen to inherit. Markarth summoned me again recently. He sat on his throne of ore crates and studied me with those eyes that have seen everything and judged everything and found everything wanting. He said I had proven myself useful, reliable, capable of following orders without asking unnecessary questions. He said there was a place for men like me in the new order he was building, a chance to be part of something larger than simple survival. He asked if I wanted to live again, not the half-life of the mine, swinging picks until my body gave out, but true life, on the surface, in the sunlight, with purpose and direction. He said the day was coming when the gates would open and the forsworn would pour out like water from a broken dam. He said I could be among them if I proved my loyalty. I knew what proving my loyalty would mean. I knew the kinds of tasks Markarth assigns to men he is testing, the blood he requires as proof of commitment. I had watched others go through this process, watched them return with haunted eyes and red hands, changed forever by whatever they had done in the darker tunnels. I said yes. I said yes because there was no other answer that would let me live, and because some part of me, the part that remembered sunlight and my son's face and my wife's voice, still wanted to live despite everything. I said yes, and Markarth smiled, and I knew that whatever remained of the man I used to be had just signed its own death warrant. The task will come soon. I do not know what it will be. I do not know if I will be able to do it. I only know that I have crossed a threshold that cannot be uncrossed, committed to a path that leads either to freedom or to a different kind of imprisonment, the kind you carry in your soul forever. There is a philosophical question that haunts me in the quiet moments between shifts. If a man does terrible things to survive, is he still the same man who entered this place? If the circumstances that shaped his choices were forced upon him by others, does he bear responsibility for what he becomes? The forsworn believe that the Nords who stole their land forced them to become what they are. The prisoners who commit atrocities to earn Markarth's favor believe they have no other choice. Everyone down here has a story about how they ended up in the dark, a narrative that places the blame somewhere else. But I remember the man who laughed while another prisoner died screaming. I remember the choices I made, small and large, that led me deeper into this shadow. No one forced me to stop caring about the boy I tried to save. No one forced me to look away when others suffered. The mine offered me those choices, and I chose survival, and each choice cost me something I can never reclaim. Perhaps that is the true horror of Cidhna Mine. Not the darkness, not the brutality, not even the forsworn and their schemes. The true horror is watching yourself transform into something unrecognizable and knowing that you cooperated in your own destruction. The guards did not break me. Markarth did not break me. I broke myself, one compromise at a time, telling myself each step of the way that I had no other option. My wife would not recognize the creature I have become. My children would fear me. The silversmith who shaped beautiful things from raw ore has become raw ore himself, reshaped by the pressures of this place into something ugly and hard and enduring. I will survive. That much seems certain now. But survival is not the same as living, and the man who eventually walks out of these gates, if that day ever comes, will not be the man who entered them. The torches are burning low in my section. Time to return to the veins, to swing my pick, to extract the silver that lines other men's pockets while I pay with pieces of my soul. Time to wait for Madanak's task, for the test that will determine whether I emerge from this darkness as one of his soldiers or as another forgotten body in the deeper tunnels. If you ever visit Markarth, look at the silver jewelry in the shops. Look at the fine cutlery on noble tables, the gleaming goblets and ornate rings. Remember that someone suffered for every ounce of that metal. Remember that beneath the streets, in the most secure prison in Skyrim, men are paying for that beauty with their lives and their sanity and their humanity. Remember that I was one of them. And remember that no one escapes Cidhna Mine. Not truly. Not ever. We carry it with us when we leave, if we leave. A weight of darkness that no amount of sunlight can burn away. The mine is patient. The mine is eternal. And the mine keeps what it takes. Forever.